Zone 2 training. It's all the rage. Just do a simple Google search and you will find hundreds of articles saying you must be doing this, with proponents claiming about 80% of your training should be written here. And following this plan will improve your mitochondrial density and increase your LT1 level, the point at which your body begins increasing lactate levels. Or simply put, increasing your fitness level and the base pace you can ride all day. But will the average Zwifter still gain these benefits? As most of us have full-time jobs, families, and other hobbies, leaving us with limited riding time per week. As most studies examine elite riders, does it still make sense to train Zone 2 if you are limited to 4 hours a week? Stay tuned, as in addition to outlining the science and how to train it, we will find out the type of training that average Zwifter should spend their limited time on. So what is Zone 2 training, and why is there so much hype around it? Simply defined, it is a lower intensity training zone, just harder than a recovery ride, but easier than riding tempo. It is common during periods of base training to increase a rider's aerobic fitness. What is the science behind it though? Well, riding in Zone 2 or 5 is the point just before LT1, where your body's lactate concentration begins increasing. This allows your body to primarily utilize type 1 or slow twitch muscles. These muscles possess greater mitochondrial density and are extremely efficient at utilizing fat, an abundant fuel source for energy, as mitochondria are the powerhouse of cells. Training in Zone 2 promotes the growth of them. With this growth, your body's ability to ride without raising your lactate level is increased, resulting in the faster burning glycogen to be saved for the tough sections of the race, where Zone 4 or 5 are required. In addition to building mitochondrial density, Zone 2 training will 1. Build capillary density, or the pipework which delivers oxygenated blood to the muscles and removes lactate and CO2. And 2. Increases cardiac adaptations, basically increasing the amount of blood that is pumped by the left ventricle and in turn enhancing your VO2 max. No, Zone 2 training won't be effective by simply hopping on the trainer twice a week for 30-minute sessions. Although studies show that Zone 2 training typically represents 80% of elite cyclist time, research ranges from advising rides last between 90 minutes to 5 hours. Additionally, these sessions should be completed 3 to 4 times a week. Elite professional athletes are likely at the top end of this range, with 20 hours a week required. However, the amateur cyclist should still aim for at least 5 hours a week to induce the stimulus needed to fatigue the type 1 muscles appropriately. Finally, utilizing this method takes time, as you will only see the true gains after 4 to 8 weeks. After this period, it remains critical to mix in Zone 2 training to maintain the base fitness level. If you are interested in adding Zone 2 to your training regimen, stay tuned, as I will detail a quick guide on how to both ride in it and calculate it as a percentage of your max heart rate and FTP. We know there is science supporting that elite riders benefit greatly from Zone 2 training, and many studies show that professional riders follow a polarized training method. Coined by Dr. Steven Seeler, this method means a rider trains about 80% of their time at low intensity, and the remainder is spent at a high intensity. But does this mean the average Zwifter will also benefit from it? As one of the issues with Zone 2 training is it assumes you have almost unlimited time to spend on the bike. It makes sense that pros who have nearly unlimited time would naturally have a ride breakdown that looks something like this. As your training volume goes up, you need to spend more time at lower zones, as even the pros struggle riding so many hours at high intensity. Even Dr. Seeler says this may not be the best training method for riders with less than 5 hours a week. In addition, many Zwifters jump on the trainer for 30 to 45-minute sessions, which is not a long enough ride to get the benefits of Zone 2 training. To find what proportion of Zwifters may fall into this category, I took a random sample of 10 riders per category, aiming to find if the average rider has the time required to benefit. Although not a large enough sample to reflect the true average Zwifter, this gives us a good estimate. For Cat A and B riders, they average above 7 hours a week, meaning most in this category could benefit, with even the minimum rider being near 5 hours a week. However, The C and D cats average just below the 5-hour-a-week threshold, meaning that average riders in these cats may not have the time required. Intuitively, these samples make sense, as we would expect higher categories to ride more often. But does this mean that the average rider in Cat C and D are left with no opportunity to gain the benefits associated with this training? Of course not. There were a number of riders in these cats that rode well above the 5-hour-a-week mark. But these cats had a much larger variance in how much each individual rode compared to the consistency of the Bs and As. If you're limited each week in time, or like me get bored or accidentally ride harder than Zone 2, an alternative can be sweet spot training. This method will provide many of the same benefits as Zone 2 training, such as increasing your mitochondrial density, but can be completed in 2 or 3 shorter sessions per week. In these workouts, you ride intervals at an intensity between Zone 3 and Zone 4. The intervals are completed at 88% to 93% of your FTP or 75 to 85% of your max heart rate. Be sure to utilize both these metrics as your heart rate can vary from day to day. You can find sweet spot training plans online, but here is a quick example providing beginner to advanced level plans. First, you can begin with interval sessions, which are shorter in length, and as you become more comfortable, work your way up to the longer 10-minute sweet spot intervals. Some of these workouts can be completed in as little as 35 minutes. I have begun working Zone 2 into my own training schedule. But it's not simply hopping on the bike and keeping power in Zwift Blue Zone. Many pros find their Zone 2 by utilizing lab testing, recording the ratio of CO2 and oxygen exhaled, and getting their blood lactate levels. However, most of us don't have access to this, but we can find our Zone 2 in 2 simple steps. First, you will need to know your FTP and max heart rate. Your power should be between 55 to 75% of your FTP, and your heart rate will be at 60 to 70% of your max. Second, you can perform the conversation test. If you can have a casual conversation uninterrupted, you are likely not riding hard enough. But if you need to continually pause to breathe after each sentence, you are likely riding too hard. Some helpful tips to complete Zone 2 sessions include 1. Selecting courses with flatter profiles. 2. Be consistent with your power. You must keep turning the pedals even on downhills, and avoid spiking the power on uphills. Even if your average power ends in Zone 2, it doesn't mean you have done it correctly. 3. Turn on the power chart to help you visualize what power zone you're in. And 4. Be disciplined. If another rider passes you, that's okay. Don't chase. Try working in these sessions and watch as your progress increases.